the most sophisticated algorithmic intelligence apparatus in human history. I mean, a machine capable of calculating the exact second a man walked into his family home to drop an unguided bomb on his living room was completely blinded on October 7th because the enemy simply stopped using cell phones.
Do not frame this as a technical glitch. The blindness was not a failure of the machinery. According to the internal military documents we are examining, this was a chosen cognitive blindness.
Unit 8200 literally stopped listening to walkie-talkies in 2022.
They officially documented analog intelligence gathering as a waste of time.
If you are listening to this, you might be caught in a dangerous cognitive trap. You probably look at artificial intelligence in warfare and think it is about precision.
You nurture this fantasy that machine learning creates surgically clean strikes, parsing the battlefield to save civilian lives.
The investigative reports from Plus 972 magazine and Local Call reveal a reality that functions in absolute reverse. Artificial intelligence in this context is not deployed for precision.
It is engineered for scale. The technology shifts the primary military bottleneck from verifying individual targets to mathematically managing acceptable civilian death quotas.
What happens to international law when the decision to end a bloodline is calculated by a black box in 20 seconds? And the infrastructure hosting that calculation is owned by a commercial tech corporation operating in a completely different hemisphere.
Look at the doctrine that built this apparatus. We have the manifesto published by Brigadier General Yossi Serial, who commanded Unit 8200. He called it the human-machine team.
He argues that human intuition is obsolete in the face of data overload, advocating for AI to generate and execute targets faster than human comprehension.
Post-October 7th, this doctrine materialized in Gaza through a system called Lavender. The reports indicated independently identified 37,000 potential combatants.
The critical detail in these sources is how Lavender defined a combatant. The machine learning model was not relying on visual confirmation of weapons or intercepted attack plans.
It scoured a population of 2.3 million people looking for metadata correlations.
Break that down. What does a metadata correlation actually look like on the ground?
It means a civilian changing their cell phone frequently, shifting residences, or merely existing in a WhatsApp group where a known militant was also present. That triggered the algorithm's threshold.
The machine was fed the traits of known operatives and searched for statistical echoes in the civilian population.
What you are describing is guilt by digital proximity. The military fed an entire urban population into a statistical dragnet and waited for the machine to find mathematical similarities.
The official legal defense of this apparatus entirely ignores the nature of that statistical dragnet. They defend the doctrine by invoking the human in the loop.
The military claims algorithms merely suggest targets, while human officers make the fatal decision.
The investigative reports shatter that defense. When a system generates hundreds of kill recommendations a day, the physical limit of human oversight becomes the vulnerability.
Utilizing testimonies from the intelligence officers themselves, the sources expose that the officers functioned exclusively as rubber stamps.
They spent an average of 20 seconds validating each machine-generated target before authorizing a strike.
20 seconds is not enough time to read a target's basic dossier, let alone verify their combatant status.
The officers admitted the only manual verification routinely performed was checking whether the target was biologically male.
Finding a target on a spreadsheet is meaningless if you cannot physically strike them. The true architecture of the kill chain is exposed when you introduce the companion systems.
The military deployed a geolocational AI program explicitly named Where's Daddy?
The name itself betrays the mechanism. The system did not hunt combatants in subterranean tunnels or active combat zones.
It passively tracked individuals from the Lavender database. It was programmed to send a push notification to tactical units precisely when the suspect crossed the threshold of their civilian family home.
The calculus here is driven by horrific economic efficiency. Striking a target in a moving vehicle or a fortified bunker requires expensive, highly calibrated precision munitions.
Striking a stationary family residence does not. For junior combatants, identified by Lavender, the military systematically deployed unguided 2,000-pound munitions, dumb bombs, into dense urban neighborhoods.
Looking at these sources, the math they were using is staggering. The institutional mathematics were formalized in the rules of engagement.
During the early stages of the campaign, the reports confirm the military pre-authorized the deaths of 15 to 20 civilians for every single junior operative identified by the machine.
If the algorithm marked an individual as a senior commander, the legally permissible quota of collateral damage expanded to over 100 civilian deaths for a single strike.
The system was designed with a known error rate. The military accepted that Lavender operated with a 10% margin of error.
When you generate a list of 37,000 targets, a 10% accepted inaccuracy mathematically mandates the inclusion of 3,700 innocent civilians in a mechanized kill list.
The military consciously authorized those false positives. They expanded this logic to civilian infrastructure with another system called the gospel.
Moving beyond human targets, the gospel utilized pattern matching to automatically recommend the destruction of what they termed power targets: high-rise residential towers, universities, banks.
Intelligence sources in these reports admitted these strikes were not designed to neutralize immediate military threats.
The destruction was optimized to induce political shock, deliberately creating mass homelessness to pressure the civilian population.
United Nations experts eventually classified this automated, systematic destruction of civil society as genocide.
The algorithm didn't solve the moral dilemma of war. It simply industrialized it, turning the chain of command into a mathematical shield.
But here is the massive hole in the narrative. If this AI is just a blunt instrument for scale in Gaza, how do we explain what the Financial Times reported regarding February 28, 2026?
Because that was not carpet bombing. The assassination of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, represents the absolute opposite extreme.
You are looking at a flawlessly kinetic, hyper-precise decapitation strike. 30 smart bombs struck the location, preceded minutes earlier by a localized cyber attack.
An attack that jammed cell towers exclusively on Pasteur Street, blinding the Iranian security apparatus and leaving their communication networks emitting endless busy signals.
The official military narrative requires you to believe machine learning found Khamenei.
Khamenei was notoriously paranoid. He rotated endlessly between secret bunkers and left zero digital footprint.
A neural network cannot analyze the metadata of a man who refuses to use the internet. You cannot track a ghost.
The AI did not track Khamenei. It tracked the friction he created in his environment. Unit 8200 analyzed the pattern of life of his security detail.
The Financial Times investigation uncovered the mechanism, and it is a massive structural irony. Israel hijacked the Islamic Republic's own authoritarian infrastructure.
Iran had built a vast network of civilian traffic cameras to monitor dissent and suppress protests. Unit 8200 compromised those unpatched IP cameras,
turning Iran's tool of domestic oppression into an Israeli reconnaissance node.
They fed millions of hours of encrypted video from Tehran's intersections into an artificial intelligence model. The system used advanced computer vision and social network analysis to parse billions of data points.
Break down what it was actually looking for in those millions of hours of traffic feeds.
It cataloged the exact arrival times of specific bodyguards. It mapped the daily commuting routes of the security apparatus.
It learned to recognize the precise parking angles of specific vehicles on Pasteur Street.
The algorithm identified the microscopic deviations in routine that mathematically signaled Khamenei's impending arrival.
The mechanism of weaponizing civilian infrastructure cuts in both directions. In March 2026, Iran executed a massive cyber retaliation, mapping the same structural vulnerability across their adversaries.
Hackers linked to Iranian intelligence exploited unpatched Chinese-made Hikvision and Dawa IP cameras across Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and the Gulf.
People buying cheap security cameras for their driveways accidentally crowdsourced a global surveillance network for foreign militaries.
Security researchers at Checkpoint identified the core vulnerability here as the remediation gap.
Wait, hold on. Remediation gap in plain English. You're referring to the delay between a company issuing a software patch and the consumer actually installing it.
These devices harbor known common vulnerabilities and exposures, critical flaws with base scores of 9.8 out of 10. The patches exist, the manufacturers release them.
Consumers and municipalities simply do not update their cameras. Millions of devices sit directly on the internet with factory passwords.
Iran utilized those unpatched cameras for preliminary reconnaissance, selecting exact coordinates for missile flight paths.
More critically, they used the compromised cameras for battle damage assessment.
During the 12-day escalation in June 2025, Iranian operators hijacked a street camera pointed at the Weizmann Institute in Israel,
capturing the exact impact of a ballistic missile in real time, long before satellite imagery could confirm the strike.
They used live civilian video feeds to recalibrate the targeting of subsequent missile waves. Every connected camera on a suburban driveway or a city intersection has been drafted as a passive reconnaissance node in an active theater of war.
Processing the visual feed of an entire foreign capital or cross-referencing the telecommunications data of 2.3 million people in Gaza demands computational power that does not exist within the physical architecture of a national military.
Unit 8200 could not build the server farms required to host this algorithmic war, which forces a confrontation with the physical logistics of the intelligence.
Where does the data actually live? In late 2021, Brigadier General Serial traveled to Redmond, Washington, to meet with Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella.
According to the reports, that meeting forged a customized, hyper-secure environment within the commercial Azure cloud, built exclusively for Israeli military intelligence.
The sheer mass of the stored intelligence breaks standard comprehension. By July 2025, Microsoft's Azure data centers in the Netherlands and Ireland held 13.6 petabytes of classified IDF data.
That volume is 350 times the size of the entire digitized Library of Congress.
This infrastructure processed 1 million intercepted Palestinian phone calls every hour. The servers housed approximately 200 million hours of audio surveillance.
This raw intelligence acted as the training data required to refine the targeting algorithms of Lavender and the Gospel.
The commercial cloud also hosted the Rolling Stone database, the central registry managing the Palestinian population.
During the peak of the bombardment in March 2024, the military's consumption of Microsoft's AI computing power spiked by a factor of 200.
Academic analysis in these sources defines this relationship as surveillance intermediaries.
When a global technology conglomerate provides the indispensable computational foundation for a state's war machine, the corporation absorbs a degree of the state's sovereign power.
Microsoft owned the physical hardware. Therefore, Microsoft held the geopolitical leverage.
The leverage fractured the partnership. Internal Microsoft employees initiated the No Azure for Apartheid campaign, staging sit-ins to protest their complicity in the mechanized targeting systems.
Human rights organizations mounted immense legal pressure, citing the extreme liability of hosting this data within the jurisdiction of the European Union.
In the fall of 2025, Microsoft executed an unprecedented corporate intervention. They fired the head of their Israeli division and unilaterally blocked Unit 8200's access to critical cloud and AI services during an act of war.
Sovereignty no longer belongs to the state with the biggest army. It belongs to the corporation holding the administrative rights to the combat cloud.
The entire timeline forces a confrontation with a dual anomaly that destroys the myth of algorithmic omnipotence.
You are looking at a military apparatus that successfully hijacked an enemy nation's traffic network to find a single man in a city of millions by analyzing the parking angle of a bodyguard's car.
Yet that exact same apparatus was utterly defenseless against an invasion planned with pen and paper and executed using analog walkie-talkies.
After all this talk of omnipotent AI and tracking bodyguards, the mastermind behind the whole thing outed himself because he tied his secret Amazon pen name to his personal Google account.
I mean, it is almost comical. He published the Human Machine Team under a pseudonym on Amazon, but linked the account directly to a Google profile containing his real name, his location history, and his social media connections.
The architect of the ultimate surveillance state couldn't figure out basic digital hygiene.
The institutional decay was systemic. In June 2024, military auditors simply walked into the highly classified Unit 8200 base in Gliah.
They spent 3 hours roaming the facility unbothered, downloading hundreds of classified documents from unlocked, unattended computer terminals.
The system that demands total visibility into the lives of millions cannot perceive the vulnerabilities in its own hallways.
Stop evaluating military AI as merely a weapon designed to identify the enemy. Legal scholars analyzing the International Court of Justice genocide case are charting a systemic shift in the nature of culpability.
The academic Carl Freiberg identifies the core issue as the absence of dolus specialis.
Wait, hold on. Dolus specialis in plain English, you are referring to specific intent. The idea that to commit a war crime, a human has to actually intend to do it.
An algorithm possesses no intent, no motivation, and no moral framework. It is a black box, spitting out unrepeatable results based on hidden statistical correlations.
When a human officer authorizes an algorithmic kill order in 20 seconds, legal accountability dissolves. The speed and scale of the machine obliterate the concept of command responsibility.
The institution uses the black box to launder its own violence. Legal theorists are attempting to introduce the concept of war torts and strict liability precisely because the current framework of international humanitarian law cannot prosecute a mathematical equation.
The technology isn't replacing human intelligence, it is functioning as an institutional alibi. It is designed to transfer the moral and legal weight of civilian slaughter from the generals who order it to the invisible code that calculates it.
You thought the terrifying part of algorithmic war was that machines would eventually decide who lives and who dies.
The real terror is that we engineered them specifically so that when the bombs drop, no human being has to take the blame.